Show me the money. Welcome to Primary Technology, the show about the tech news that matters. In iOS 18, the newest beta, you can actually have ads whisked away like a Thanos snap. Google has been ruled to be breaking the rules of a monopoly. That might mean big changes with their relationship to Apple. We'll get over that. X is suing advertisers for not giving them money. Google also discontinues the Chromecast, another victim for the Killed by Google website. So apparently there's a Chromecast device here in my office because when I said that, something activated. That was so strange. Anyway, this episode is brought to you by you, the members that support us directly. I'm one of your hosts, Stephen Robles, and joining me, laughing in the background, is Jason Aten. How's it going, Jason?
This is going to be the most interesting show we've ever done for so many reasons.
I did not realize what voice-activated device answers to Chromecast.
I don't know, but you only have, 13 of them sitting on your desk, probably?
Well, no, it wasn't even the AI devices. It was like something in a drawer. I mean, I do have a that was super strange.
You have a Pixel?
Oh, yes. I have a Pixel 6a in my drawer. Wow.
I don't know why it's turned on, but...
Well, because I did a video about the features in iOS 18 messages, and I showed off RCS between my Google Pixel. And I was like, wow, that was strange. Okay. So, wow. This is going to be a crazy show, everyone, because I'm sick. I'm on a time limit. I talked to the friend people. Well, we can talk about that in a second. Anyway, 5-star review shout-outs. We got 2 new 5-star reviews. Thank you for these. TXBoy6, if that means you're from Texas, howdy. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, see, I'm going to have to mute the coughs. And then Fighting Major. Thank you for those 5-star reviews. Fighting Major wrote a thesis in his review about the Apple Pencil tip, which we appreciate. You know, I'm still going to do it how I do. I can't do it any other way.
I didn't understand exactly what he was saying, but I do think that he agrees with me.
He does agree with you. He was saying based on left-handed or right-handedness and taking it off like...
Couldn't quite follow all that. I just stopped reading at the part where it was like Jason's right. That's it.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Well, I'm going to say something where I was right-ish is on the last episode, maybe one of the most controversial hot takes, and we had multiple, was my take on WhatsApp being a garbage app. And we have a actual conversation started by Will Kennard in our community. So I'm going to link this in the show notes if you would like to participate. It's a WhatsApp versus iMessage conversation talking about WhatsApp and iMessage. Very cool. Social.primarytech.fm if you want to join that community. But also on social media. I had a lot of people, especially international, like in the UK and Europe, saying we have to use WhatsApp because that's what everybody uses, but we also know it is garbage. And I felt vindicated. Like, I understand it's ubiquitous, and I think there's a difference between this is a system everyone has to use, like the United States Postal Service, and there actually being a difference between a good system and a bad system.
I think the problem most people have with WhatsApp is that the UI is pretty ugly. And so that's what most people mean by it's a garbage app. But the functionality for group messaging I stand by, it is far superior than iMessage. I agree. I hate, my eyes bleed when I have to look at it. Okay. I'm not arguing that. iMessage, much more beautiful.
Right.
But, and everyone who is saying that it's garbage is, I think, mostly talking about the UI. The functionality of it is far superior. I just want to now that's basically the story of Facebook, right? Like, they don't have to make it pretty. You just have to use it, kind of a thing. And so, Facebook is not a pretty app to look at, right?
No.
It's just not.
I was thinking Instagram. Instagram used to be pretty, but also Instagram started not owned by Facebook. So
right. And although, Threads is probably the best looking app that they make. We don't have to go down this road. But my point was simply, people who are saying that WhatsApp is garbage, they don't like looking at it because it's ugly. And I completely agree with that. Yeah. But it is far more useful and far more functional for groups. That's all.
And I think that's where I was coming from, is it just looks garbage. But I will say, so I was testing RCS on my Google Pixel, which is why I just responded when I said Chromecast, and iPhones to see how group messages worked in RCS. And so I actually messaged my own Pixel and then a friend who also has RCS. And the group messages, like you're saying, are inferior because built in the Messages app on your iPhone in iOS 18 with RCS, you don't get ellipses, you don't get delivered and read receipts, you don't get any of that stuff, where you do get it in WhatsApp. So yeah, I get it. I don't have to like it, okay?
No, and I agree with you. It's ugly. It's not a garbage app. It's just a garbage UI. Those are two important differences, right?
Exactly. Okay, and the last thing I'll say before we actually get to the news was we had our first interview episode. Actually came out 2 days ago as you're listening to this episode, and it was me interviewing Adam Lisagor and Kailee McGee. They were the people it's Sandwich Video is Adam Lisagor. Kailee McGee is the director of the trailer for the Friend AI gadget we talked about in our last week's episode. And so I interviewed them to talk about the Friend AI gadget. And we get pretty philosophical, literally talking about free will and determinism at one point and what we should expect these AI gadgets to do. But it was a fun conversation. I appreciate them coming on. There were a lot of like deeper questions that I probably should have asked, and we just couldn't get to like from the technical side and the product side. But it was our first interview episode. It was fun. It's a weird, trippy episode, so I encourage you to check it out. Listen to it.
Yeah, this is the first time hearing about this. I was not invited to this interview.
That is not true.
That's not true. I was not on this interview, which maybe that was good. I don't know. But it was not because Steven did not invite me. He did invite me. He even tried to schedule it around me, but we're leaving on vacation later this weekend, and I just had to cut something, and this was the thing. But I have two things. One, I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I was sure that you were going to order one on the air by the time this interview was over. Like, that's just a Steven thing that should happen. But it's true. As far as I can tell, it did not happen.
I did not order one yet. Not yet.
To get rid of the yet. Just you did not order one, so I'm very proud of that. But I do have a bone to pick. I cannot believe there's a lot of things you didn't ask about. And the journalist in me is like, yeah, what LLM is it using? Where is it storing that information? How is it interacting with your phone? What are the word privacy never once came up. But the thing I'm really like, I just can't believe Steven didn't ask is you didn't ask about the charging situation. Which, given the history of the AI devices that you've had so far, like, does this thing last for 32 minutes? Does it last all day? Like, I need to know, will it catch fire when you put it on your nightstand?
Oh,
maybe you should actually get one just to find those things out. I mean, $99 is not that much to burn to find out if it burns.
That's pretty good. So that's what I'm saying. $99, no subscription. I thought about that after the interview. I was like, where do you plug this in or what? And I will say, when you look at what's included in the box on the website, it does say a USB-C charging cable. So it looks like there is just a direct port. You just plug this in, and it does that. But to your point, it is listening all day, like as long as it's connected to Bluetooth. Actually, it's listening, and so the always listening is when connected to Bluetooth. So even if you're not wearing it, like the Humane AI pin, even if it's just sitting around but connected to your phone via Bluetooth, it's still listening the whole time. So I do have to imagine battery life is that might be suspect. Well, you're
also,
right.
And not only is the other thing that goes, and this is actually in all seriousness, that if I would have been on there, I probably would have wanted to push on this, but maybe it would have been good that I didn't, because to my knowledge, Adam Lisagor, I mean, we don't know if he has a stake in Friend or not. Like, he made the video.
He made the video,
but he's very bullish on it. And you asked him a lot of questions about how it works, and so he clearly like knows a lot about the product. But my main thought on this was, if you wear this into public places, will they I mean this seriously, maybe they named it Friend. You won't have any real people friends, because who wants to hang out with someone wearing a device that is listening all the time? There is a real social thing there. And I was less skeptical of it after listening to him talk about it, because he basically talked about it like a pocket pet. Do you know what I mean? Like, he talked about it as this is
it's a Tamagotchi.
Kind of
listening.
Yeah, but it's like you don't actually have to care for it necessarily, but it's like a toy. It's not it is not as aspirational as what the Rabbit R1 or what the Humane AI pin we're trying to do, which is like, we're going to help you manage your life without other devices, kind of a thing. This is more like, no, just talk to it and it'll send you messages and it'll just be fun. Right. Okay, I'm glad they put it into that bucket, and for $99, that seems like the appropriate bucket. But I do think, I don't know, if I was in a meeting and someone was wearing one of those, I'd probably ask them to take it off.
Not enough to take it off. You got to disconnect it from Bluetooth.
I would ask them to put it into, what do they call Faraday
trash
cage.
Compactor?
A Faraday cage.
A Faraday cage. Yeah.
Trash compactor. That too.
Either way. Anyway, we'll see. It doesn't ship till Q1 2025, so we're still a ways away. I'll probably get it though. I mean, $100, I'll see. I'll see what Friend says about all my podcast recordings. We'll see.
Oh my goodness.
A couple quick things, and the Google antitrust ruling we got to get to because that's big news. But the 5th beta of iOS 18 came out. I'm on 18.1. This is a mess, Jason. I want to downgrade so bad, but I didn't have the patience to do a computer backup of my iPhone when it was on 17, and now my iCloud backups are all iOS 18. So even if I wanted to downgrade right now, I would have to start from scratch on my iPhone.
Why do you want to downgrade? Why is it? What is the mess?
Well, battery life is not great, even worse than normal. But also, like, passkeys are failing sometimes, which is definitely a problem. Most often, it's in like the PlayStation app when I'm trying to like approve my son's time, and that's I can not really get around it. He just stops playing because I can't approve more time. But there was also like Microsoft Authenticator passkey was messing up. So there's those weird things like that. But I don't like the feeling of being on like a cutting edge beta. I like the feeling of stability. And you know what I mean? Also,
says the guy with a drawer full of AI devices that might catch fire but definitely don't work. I like stability. Quote that.
And I forgot how much betas break the Apple Home experience. And like I'm getting this kind of stuff where it's like set up your home key in express mode. I already had that set up. I already did all that. Don't show me that thing. And so I'm like, do I want to go through all of the things? But then the problem is when there's like another 18.1 beta that has Genmoji in it, I'm going to want to upgrade again. So I'm like, maybe I just stick with it. But anyway, I have this device. This is on the 18 beta, not the 18.1. And the beta 5 has this amazing new Thanos snap feature. So what you can do is when you're on a website that has a bunch of ads where the information doesn't even show you articles anymore, they just show you ads. And then you could go hit the little highlight button here at the top. I'm showing this if you want to see youtube.com/@primarytechshow. There's a hide distracting items option. And when you do that, you can now like tap an item, like this whole ad that's literally covering the entire screen, and then just tap hide. Look at that. It just Thanos snapped it away. And it remembers that. And it will also do it for things like cookie things. If you see the cookie message on a website every single time you visit it, or there's just an ad banner at the very top of a website all the time, you can literally Thanos snap them away now, and they're just gone forever. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. That is pretty cool. It's like, it's pretty satisfying to make all that distracting. And listen, I just want to like disclosure, like I write for a website that has a lot of ads on it. It has way more than I wish it did. Like people are going to say that, like if you link to my articles and you try to read them, and yes, but every website is like that. And I wish that there was a better way. I wish that the revenue people at websites didn't get to ever talk to the website design people at websites, right?
Well, the other revenue method is paywalls, and everybody hates that too. So it's kind of a lose-lose.
Yeah, especially, well, the worst is when you subscribe to something like the New York Times, but every time you open the New York Times, it wants you to upgrade to whatever the next level of the New York Times is. It's like if you just get the New York Times news, every time you log in, it will want you to pay for the subscription for the games. It's like, stop telling me I need to upgrade.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But also like the newsletter things, if you visit a website that asks you to sign up for the newsletter literally every visit, you can now just whisk it away. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Also, after we recorded last week, Apple reported its earnings, which I believe it beat expectations, but it's because iPad sales actually rebounded with the release of the M2 iPad Air and the M4 iPad Pros, and services revenue up 5% from the year-ago quarter, and services revenue is now approaching, I don't know how close it is, but like approaching device revenue. I saw that somewhere. Does that sound accurate?
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem for like Apple is, yes, its services revenue. It's not that the actual net sales, it's the amount of money it's making in terms of its profit from the two things.
Profit.
Yeah.
Right.
So, because I mean, there's actually quite a big bit of difference between the amount of iPhones it sells and the amount of, I mean, and that's the other thing, like services, we think like that's people paying for Apple TV Plus. It's just not. It's Google, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
And it's App Store commissions. Like those are the two main things. There's not $24 billion worth of people signing up for Fitness Plus. That's just not happening. It doesn't matter how many times Apple raises the price of the Apple One bundle. They're never going to get to $24 billion per quarter, right? So what essentially is happening though is like the net sales for the different products is like services is starting to get close to what it is making in terms of products as well. So yeah, and that's why Apple's profit margin keeps going up, which is what everybody talks about is the margin, because the margin on its hardware is, like 30 something percent. That's great. The margin on its services business, it was 74% this last quarter.
Right.
74% of money. And again, like that's partially skewed because if you think about like the profit margin for the App Store requires you to have an App Store, which is very expensive to maintain, right? But 30% on your app that you made is like a lot of good free money for Apple, but they did have to build iOS and the App Store and whatever. But for the Google thing, that's just free money. Like $20 billion of free money. So
right. Here's I'm going to put this link in the show notes. It's 6 colors. Jason Snell. He always has lots of colorful charts.
He does a great job. It's one you should just bookmark it every time. Like he does a great job of making pretty charts.
And the services revenue, like obviously you could see just over time, the last whatever this is, few years, just going up. And Apple's still making money. Here's the.
They make a lot of money, and I did notice that they, the wearables is not really going up all that much, even though they've got that Vision Pro sitting out there.
But, we don't do a lot of rumors on this show. That's because I have PTSD from rumors. But the Apple Watch this year, it's the 10th anniversary, which, technically, whatever. But the 10th anniversary. So it might be a big redesign. Might be a super cycle. We'll see. I don't know what they're going to do to make it that.
Does the Apple Watch need a redesign? I know that's a controversial take, but... it doesn't. It doesn't. The answer is no. It does not need a redesign. What are they gonna do? But put out I know people want that, but they just want something new and different. And I understand that with the Apple Watch, which is a device that you're essentially going to have to upgrade at some point because the battery will just stop working. But I put on my Apple Watch Series 7 for like a day. And the only reason I went back to the Ultra is I'm just like, I can't see anything. It's too I need I wanted the screen to be bigger, but it was fine. There's not it's still a great product. So
I will say I'm probably buying my wife a watch this year because she has a hand-me-down Series 7 from me, which is like the titanium large size. It's a nice Apple Watch. And it was nicer than the Series 5 she had before. So she's been using that, but it's the larger size. And she's wanted to get like a nicer band. She's had like sport bands for a while. And I was going to get her the modern buckle from Apple, but that is only for the smaller case size from Apple. You can't get a modern buckle for the larger size. So, I know that is first world problems or whatever, but she also just she prefers the smaller Apple Watch size just because it's more discreet, and it looks better. But anyway, all right, probably the biggest news from this past week is that a judge ruled that Google is a monopolist in an antitrust case, meaning that Google is taking advantage of its position and it's doing something illegal. Now, we don't know, there's not been a sentencing or ramification stated yet. That remains to be seen what actually has to change. But it's basically that Google has monopolistic power when it comes to search specifically, and the judge is going to rule that Google has to change something about how it does it. Now, for the user experience, it might not change very much, which will be interesting. But I will say as a YouTuber, slight concern, because there is an amount of traffic to videos by them showing up in Google search results, and who knows if that will be part of the ruling, that using its monopolistic power, it's promoting its own service, namely YouTube, in search results. But what other details can you tease out of this? Because big deal.
Yeah, it is. So you said it's a big story. I mean, it's hard to think of it this way, but this is probably a bigger story than the 8.5 million blue screens of death, right? Which was a pretty big story.
Right. Big story.
Because this is the first real victory by the Department of Justice against a tech company since Microsoft, basically, right? The government has tried several times now to challenge big tech companies, and they've essentially lost. They tried to stop the Activision Blizzard acquisition. They've tried to stop a lot of other things, and they just really haven't had a lot of success. But this one is pretty big. And basically, they said Google is a monopolist, which means they have a monopoly, and they are using they're doing stuff to extend that. And so in this case, what they are doing is they are using their dominant position and they are extending that by entering into agreements with other companies to be the default search placement. So this is the Apple deal where Google is the default search engine on Safari, on the iPhone and on the Mac and on the iPad or whatever. And there's a revenue sharing agreement. So Google doesn't just like cut a check, but the amount of money is a lot. It's like $20 billion we discovered during this. That because of the traffic that Apple is funneling to Google, you use your iPhone, you search for something, you click on a result that's a sponsored ad, and Google makes money for that, and part of that now goes back to Apple. That's how that basically is working. And they do the same thing with Firefox, right? And it actually represents, that revenue share represents roughly 80% of Mozilla's revenue, right? They do the same thing with Samsung. So Google has created all of these deals to be the default search engine because they know that not no one, but basically no one changes the default. And so it's not, those deals in and of themselves are not necessarily illegal. If Microsoft was making these deals, I don't think that there would be any, like, they wouldn't have been challenged because Bing has such a tiny market share, right? They aren't a monopoly. There might be a monopoly in other areas. You can make that argument. That's fine. The government did at one point and won, but they're not in search. Nobody uses Bing. Let's just be honest. Unless you happen to accidentally download Microsoft Edge, and it doesn't matter how many times you change. It doesn't matter how many times you change your default. It's just going to keep trying to tell you it's Bing. But
it's maddening.
Yeah, it's terrifying. But the funny thing to me, and I wrote a story about this morning, because essentially what the federal judge said was, and the federal judge did say Google is like the dominant and best search engine. And for all of the things Google has that are bad about the search experience, there isn't anyone better. And the reason there isn't anyone better is it's too expensive and nobody's going to bother because everybody just uses Google. It's this vicious circle. Right. But my take on this is basically people are going to just keep using Google. Whether it's the default search engine, whether it's whatever, people are going to still keep using Google. The biggest difference is Google's just not going to be allowed to pay to be the default, right? They're just not going to be able to Apple 20. So my thought is like, they're going to keep getting all the same amount of traffic. They're just not, it's just the lawsuit just saved them $20 billion.
Well, and so the picture I'll try to paint here is like, so what may happen? The Department of Justice here in the U.S. might say, okay, Google can't pay to be the default, and there can be no default. We have to give users choice, because that's usually how the laws will go to be in favor of the user. And so they might make Apple, like the EU has made Apple do with web browsers in Europe, put up a splash screen the first time you open Safari on your iPhone to say, choose your web browser. So now the choice is up to the user. Well, again, like you're saying, most users have used Google as their default search engine for 15 years on their iPhone, longer on their desktop. And so if they see a list of Bing, like you said, DuckDuckGo, maybe what, Arc?
Ecosia, right? Like, yeah.
Opera. No, they didn't have search engine. And then, or Google search, it's going to be a muscle memory thing, like probably the same amount of people, if not slightly less, but inconsequential almost, are just going to choose Google. And at that point, Google then will continue to have the market share of Google searches, still be the main search engine on the iPhone, but they won't have to have paid Apple to do it. Honestly, the whole web browsing thing in the EU has just caused more confusion and frustration because people are like, I have this list of web browsers. What do I even do? I've never heard of Brave or whatever. And so they'll just choose Safari.
Chrome. Everybody chooses Chrome.
They choose Chrome. But on their iPhone, though, they just choose Chrome. I guess they...
Maybe not. That's the thing we're going to see because it's new enough and we don't have that information that now that people... We'll see if people would choose Chrome.
But I think that's a more one-to-one correlation where like the biggest web browser, like Chrome has 60 to 70% of the desktop web browser usage. And so that is an extremely recognizable name. So if someone had the choice of Safari or Chrome, but I forget what the splash screen looks like. Apple Safari also has very strong name recognition as far as like iPhone users. Like they know, like I just go to Safari to look at the internet. And so we don't have that data, so we don't know. But if you change that from a web browser list choice when you first open it to a search engine, I feel like far and away, everyone's just going to choose Google. And so they will continue to be the lead and have a quote-unquote monopoly, but also save $20 billion a year doing that.
Well, I think it's actually weirder than that, because an important piece to understand is Apple's not a part of this at all. So the federal judge cannot say, part of the remedy cannot be Apple has to do a thing, right? Because Apple's not a party to this. So the remedies for this is going to be Google is not allowed to enter into these types of agreements. We'll say nothing about Microsoft. So Microsoft could enter into an agreement with Apple to make Bing the default search option, or Brave, which has a search engine, or DuckDuckGo, which people just are basically using Bing, which is hilarious. Bing represents essentially everything that's not. Yeah. Like DuckDuckGo is just Bing. Anyway, so. Because it's just too expensive to crawl the entire internet and like index it and do all these things. So they just get a lot of their search results directly from Bing, and that's fine. They just basically are building their own UI and then their own ad layer on top of it. And so regardless of that, the more likely outcome is there can still be a default. Like there has to, like, other than what you described where the user has to pick a choice at startup, which is just stupid, there's going to be some kind of a default, right?
Right.
It just,
which you can change now, just to be clear.
Yep.
Like you could go in your settings and change now.
And it could still be Google. Google just can't enter into an agreement to pay for that position. Right. So really, the thing that I think is just kind of mind-blowing about this, and there was a really interesting conversation, I think it was on Dithering, between Ben Thompson and John Gruber, which is a great podcast. It's a subscription-only podcast, but it's 15 minutes twice a week. And they were talking about, like, the pay the most for this are companies like Apple or really Mozilla, even though they're not paying for it in the largest dollar amount, it is the largest amount of their revenue. And that's what happens when you try to regulate competition in one area. There are all these unintended consequences, one of which is going to be that something like 30% of Apple's services profit is just going to be gone, like just wiped away, and people will still keep using Google. So what I think the most logical outcome from this is, and I think that this is like just is obvious. I just want to be on the record now so that when this happens, we can look back at this. But Apple is absolutely going to build a search engine.
Right.
The only thing that has kept Apple from building a search engine up to this point is $20 billion. Like, listen, Stephen, there's a lot of things you could pay me $20 billion not to do. Basically anything. Pick a thing, and I will just not do it forever if you give me $20 billion. I'm fine with that.
Fair enough. I will not build an app for $20 billion a year.
I will sit in this room for the rest of my life for $20 billion. Like, whatever. I don't even care. But the main reason I think Apple hasn't done it is it's expensive and it's hard to spin up a search engine and to like, how long would it take Apple, even with 2 billion iOS devices, how long would it take Apple to build up a search engine that's just throwing off $20 billion of profit, right? Which is essentially what they're getting by doing nothing. But now that that's not going to be the case, I promise you that there are a lot of people inside of Apple that would very much rather not be sending all of that traffic to Google, because it kind of violates the thing that Apple talks about the most, which is privacy, right? And so, go ahead.
And I think with Apple Intelligence, for a long time, Apple has already been trying to obfuscate going to Google search results, whether it's Spotlight on the Mac, whether it's you're asking.
Well, Siri is basically a search engine, right? Like, it has a search engine. Yeah.
I like how I said voice assistant. You were just like Siri.
Yeah, it's that thing that you don't want me to say. I'm sorry, but like
that's funny. No, but all of that, it has been trying to give you the results without you going to the search engine. Whether it's, up until this point, it's largely been like Wikipedia pages and just giving you, like, trying to point you directly to that page. Sometimes it'll give you actor information or whatever. But I could totally see Apple ramping that up. And Apple Intelligence, which is literally on my iPhone right now, it's not smart yet. We don't have like the updated voice assistant. But once that's like fully rolled out, I think Apple's going to try to really obfuscate the need for a lot of that. It could even, now I don't know how the DOJ would feel about this, but like when you tap in the address bar and you don't type a URL, but you type a search term, that it shows you Apple Intelligence results before it, and then a little option to say, search the web at the bottom in real small text. Apple could just try to do that. And we have Apple Maps now on the web. That's a part of the whole, search engine game, is being able to offer business results in the web, search results, so you can see local businesses and tap here for directions and all that kind of stuff. But the counterpoint to myself is seeing the challenge that Apple has had in Apple Maps to create the index of local businesses and, restaurant reviews and all of that. Turns out it is very hard to kind of steer, millions of people to providing data. Now, the Maps thing is more like active. Like someone literally has to either post a photo of this business, tap a like, review it in Apple Maps. Like that is a much more active process than just searching for something and tapping a link, because that's something someone was doing already. So it is more of a challenge to get that kind of Maps local business data. But there is a curve of, if Apple were to do a search engine, there is a curve of like trying to get users to provide enough input and data to improve that search engine. And can Apple Intelligence plus whatever search engine that's behind the scenes, can it get good enough, fast enough, where it's not another Apple Maps launch situation where everybody's like, well, this is garbage, I'm just going back to Google, which is literally what happened back then.
Right. One difference, though, but I think the Apple Maps thing is actually a good analogy, because Apple built a Maps app platform because it didn't want to be sending all of this important information about its customers to Google, right?
Right.
Apple didn't build Maps because it thought maybe we could make some money on advertising, because advertising is such an infinitesimally small part of Apple's business.
Although, can I just say one thing though?
Yeah,
the guides in Apple Maps, they feel a little funny. The amount of guides that I see with like, here's a Rachel Ray's guide to restaurants in New York City, I'm like, something's up there. Something's up.
Okay, I'm just saying, we just saw the earnings, and advertising is not a meaningful part of what they're making money right now. And I mean, so maybe that'll be different in the future, but none of those things existed when Apple started building Maps. Like they weren't, I don't think that this is like a long game to advertising revenue. I think that this is we want to make these for our customers, and we believe, or at least we preach, that privacy is we believe it's a fundamental human right. And the single most personal piece of data you could share with a company is, where are you right now? Like literally, like, where are you and where did you want to go? Right. I think Apple would much rather. I was at CES when Jane Horvath, who at the time was like the global privacy or whatever, and was talking specifically about how Apple has a tiered approach to location data. It's like, if you're looking for the weather, you don't need to know pinpoint where you are. The weather doesn't change block by block. We just need to know generally where you are. And someone from Facebook sitting 2 seats down are like, no, we just want to know exactly where you are all the time, because then we can show you ads.
Amazon Sidewalk.
As you're walking down the street, when you walk past the thing, we want to show you a personalized ad for that baker you just walked past. And Apple's like, no, that's not how it should be. If you're using a map and we're going to give you point-to-point directions, then we need to know, and we'll let you know that that's what we're doing. So I think, but Apple does have like Business Connect, which is a small business, like, manage my business on Apple Maps. So they are doing some pretty active. We just don't see it as consumers, right? Because they're not calling you and I. They don't need to know where my shed is. Please don't put it on a map. But I think that it's like, I think Apple Maps is a good example of when Apple sees, hey, here's a better experience we can provide for our customers that aligns with their values. And in this case, if the only thing keeping them from doing that was $20 billion, and the $20 billion goes away, they're going to do something.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is, lest we forget, the DOJ is also suing Apple. That came out several months ago, that the DOJ was going to bring them to court. That hasn't started. We don't know what will result there. There was lots of monopolistic claims on Apple's practices for that. So I think in general, 10 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, I think the internet is going to feel a lot different, and how you get to things. Search GPT, which we talked about last week, will be publicly available surely in the next year or so, just even conservatively. And so, I think this is, I don't know what we call this, Web 4? Is this the new age of the internet? I mean, this is...
I don't know.
I don't like all those terms. I don't like any of those terms. But.
Well, just for anyone listening who wants to just let us know, to close the loop on that, since you mentioned the DOJ lawsuit against Apple, the most recent thing there is Apple last week asked the DOJ, or asked the judge, to dismiss the case. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. They are suing them, but Apple's position is basically that the DOJ is asking courts to redesign the iPhone, which is, I think we can all agree that that's not a good idea.
No.
And I've taken the position pretty consistently that Apple should change some things, right?
Right.
The way it treats developers, the way it does things, like the USB-C port on the iPhone, whatever. But believing that Apple should change some things is not the same as believing that courts or regulators should force them to change them. I think that that's like a bad place to be. And I think a lot of times the argument is like, well, if they won't change them, then we need the government to force them. And I just feel like, yeah, then you get these unintended outcomes. Like what happened with the browser ballot, which was originally because of Microsoft, right? With Microsoft Explorer. Right. Because of the browser ballot, we now have Chrome as the default browser across the world, which is like basically, we found out recently, like the search leak that Rand Fiskin, I think, when they reported on that the Google absolutely uses Chrome interactions to inform its search engine, right? Like, so the government was like, Microsoft leveraging Windows to make Internet Explorer the default browser. That's bad. So let's make people choose. And then everybody chose Chrome, and now you have the same thing. Like, yeah, I don't think the government's very good at this is all I'm trying to say.
Right. Well, we will see what happens with this Google search DOJ case. Of course, we'll be covering it here. A little distracted because I've heard the chainsaw starting. I gave Jason a heads up that they were going to start cutting down trees. So I'm going to do my best.
That's not an ominous antitrust reference. No. The chainsaws are coming.
Literally, hurricane season down here, so we're getting a tree cut down. So anyway, I'm going to try and use all the tools
I can't
of my
hear
arsenal.
Them, so.
Right. Well, I'll try to use everything to eliminate the chainsaws. But if you hear a chainsaw, you're not imagining things. It's happening. All right. Another wild story. And now listen, we're going to talk about X right now. And I just need you all to know. Okay. If you have strong feelings about this, and maybe you disagree with us heartily, what we would like you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review, and then you can tell us why we're wrong. But the 5-star review is very important because
it is.
We're a 5-star podcast. But we have to talk about this because Linda Yaccarino posted a video on X. I believe this was yesterday as we're recording, so this was Tuesday. And this video, 33 million views. But she basically came on here saying that X, the social network, is going to sue advertisers because they are boycotting X and not spending dollars in advertising on the platform. Now, an important piece of context here, Elon Musk was literally on stage at a conference several months ago and told advertisers directly multiple times to, quote, go F yourselves. Like, Elon Musk literally told advertisers that multiple times on stage at a conference. He is the owner, if you forget, of X. So Elon Musk told advertisers, go F yourselves. We don't need your money. Then when the interviewer, I forget who it was, asked him, well, what's going to happen? He said, well, X will die. And so, okay. And now, Linda Yaccarino, who looks like she's under duress in this video, I'm just going to be honest.
This is a hostage video.
This is a hostage video. Is saying they're going to sue advertisers because they hate you, the user, and they hate us, and they hate free speech. The amount of time she points at the camera with an open hand, it makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to be honest. In this video, like that, I just can't do it. It's too much. The fact that this was done with this sincerity is mind-boggling to me, especially in light of what Elon told advertisers directly. And like, there was a bunch of jokes going on social media, which I thought was very funny, of like, I'm going to sue MKBHD because he's never given me money. And he's boycotting my channel by not advertising. No, I'm going to sue The Verge because they're not advertising on this podcast. And it's like, this is the most insane. I don't even know what to say about it. Like, I don't understand why they think this is going to, like, is there any basis for this at all, Jason?
No. And I think they know that it, but here's the thing. Don't think of this as an attempt to actually win any money in court. Think of this as a PR stunt, essentially, because it will make certain people very, like, motivated. Okay.
Right.
And the only thing you need to know that backs up what I just said is she starts the video talking about like a congressional report. Okay. And that congressional report came from a committee where one group of people, one side, I'm going to try to be really ambiguous here. It was complaining that essentially these advertisers not giving money to X is choking off a particular viewpoint because they don't like that viewpoint. And so And again, that report essentially says that those viewpoints deserve to survive, and so advertisers should be giving money equally to every platform, because not doing that is harming certain viewpoints. And like the quote was that what it appears that this group, so essentially they're suing these two like coalitions of advertising groups, right? That have essentially said, we don't recommend that you advertise on X at this time because we don't believe that it's brand safe, right? We don't, does Procter and Gamble want its ads to show up next to certain types of content that they believe appear on X? Now, what we do know is like I use X. I don't see some of the content that they're talking about, but we do know that X has essentially eliminated mostly its content moderation and safety team, right? Like we just know that that's a true thing. So it does seem likely that there might be more of that kind of content on there, that you might experience it. And if you are a brand and you have $1 million to spend on ads, you're going to put the $1 million where you think that A, you'll get the best return, and B, you won't harm your reputation. And right now, they don't believe that X is a place to do that. And X is like, well, that's anti-competitive. And their argument is that these brands are collaborating in an anti-competitive way to not spend money with X. And the weird thing is, it's like a twist of antitrust law, because essentially they're saying that they're colluding to deprive X of money, but that's not actually illegal. It's not illegal for them to all get together and decide we're just not going to advertise there. Because like that's a tangential market, right? Like they're not colluding to lower the price against X. The other thing that's weird is, generally speaking, antitrust law is meant to protect consumers. It's not necessarily meant to protect businesses from each other just because they don't like each other, right? Like it's just a very weird thing. But the take that resonated the most with me, I mean, it was funny. Everyone's like, I'm suing Apple because they've never given me money. I'm suing whoever because they don't give me money either. I saw this thing first and I thought it was like deep fake. I thought for sure, this is like Grok. Somebody like loaded Linda Yaccarino into Grok. And I honestly think that this is somewhat sad, because Linda Yaccarino was one of the most respected advertising executives, not just executives somewhere, advertising executives at NBC Universal. Like she was a legend in that industry. And everyone assumed that when she was coming to X, it's because Elon Musk was serious about courting and winning back advertisers. But basically, he just sends her out there to say, like, hey, we're moving out of San Francisco. Hey, we're suing advertisers. Hey, like, I don't know. It's so unfortunate, because this is her last job. Like, so this is why she has to make this video, because where do you go from here? Who would hire her to run our company now?
It is wild. So is she's the CEO, right? And Elon Musk
that's the name on her door. I don't know if she has a door to an office, but that would be the name, the title on the door. Yeah.
So she's the CEO and Elon Musk is the owner.
Yeah, he's the owner.
He's the owner. So I mean, it would be crazy to be like, you need to find us advertisers. You're the CEO, and then the owner is literally telling advertisers to go F yourself. Like that is just wild stuff. And it is sad. Like it is sad. But I would also say for brand safety, and I'm gonna mention Threads in this too. I have noticed I still use X. I've not been like one of the people who are like, deleting their accounts or whatever, because I still find value. I still see things from creators that I like to follow there and not on Threads. There's still content I see there, and there's still engagement when I post on there. So I'm there still. But I will say, whenever a tweet, I still say tweet, gets just a little bit of visibility, there is a wave of like garbage in the replies. Like there is more like bot accounts, inappropriate accounts. Like there is more, like significantly more of that now than there was 1 year, even 2 years ago. So there is more of that. There is more just like junk. Like the For You feed is not as good as it used to be. And I do use the For You feed because I see a lot of times creators that I would not know otherwise, and I enjoy being able to find people like that. But it's not as good as it used to be. And honestly, most of the ads I see are now advertisements from X to remove ads from X, which is
Did you see what I posted? I posted a thing on X where there was an ad for X Premium that I tapped the little thing to say, don't show me this ad anymore. I don't like this ad. And the next screen that pops up is, if you pay for Premium, you won't see as many ads. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, I know, yes, I know. It's so bad. And it's like, no, I'm not going to pay for an ad-free thing. Like, no. But I will say, Threads, they have a problem over there, too, with some of their content management, because I see a lot of accounts that are spam accounts, and that are, they may be real people, I'm not sure, but sometimes I see it in the replies, sometimes in my For You page, and it's like, I don't really want to see this. So I've been trying, and also the algorithm on Threads has been very like, if I engage with one person asking for podcast tips and I send them a video, the next day, all I see on my For You page are people like, hey, starting a podcast, got any tips? Hey, starting a podcast, got any tips? And I'm like, listen, Threads, I helped a person. I wouldn't mind seeing a post like this every once in a while from someone I don't follow, but don't flood my feed with it. Like, I follow a bunch of tech creators and journalists. Why don't I see them? So Threads does not have it on lock either. But, I don't know, are we seeing the end of X? Is this like the slow...
Well, okay, maybe. I just want to differentiate, though, because what you're describing on Threads is, yes, obnoxious. And I've experienced the same thing where you like reply to someone and suddenly you find yourself in a whole new world of Threads for the next week or something until you like somehow detox from whatever the thing was that you tapped on. But generally it's just annoying. And even spam is just like annoying. The other day on Instagram, I got like 40 follows in like 13 minutes. And I don't have that many Instagram followers. You're welcome to go follow me there. It's just at Jason A, and that's great. All I post are pictures of like our backyard. Like it's not very exciting. Tech. Sometimes I do post from tech events, so like there's sometimes cool stuff. But anyway,
also not many people know you're actually an Olympic high jumper, so you've been recently posting those pictures.
It's true. I've been posting from Paris. I'm actually just in Paris right now with a virtual background of my office.
That's right. Exactly right.
Definitely not. That's why we had to record. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
But what I was just, I don't even know where I was trying to go. Oh, but the difference between that is, so on Instagram, like I got a whole bunch of like clearly bots that just, so I just went through and blocked them. It was annoying. That's different though than if I'm paying money to advertise against content that I might think is offensive, right? Bots are annoying, but they're not necessarily offensive. Some of them are, but like spam is like, just a bunch of extra signal or a bunch of extra noise that make it harder to find what you're looking for. But that's different than when you find something and you're like, oh, this person really means this super offensive thing. It's not spam. It's just like bad person. Right. Like, and so I feel like that's the difference where you're like, and actually to my knowledge, Threads doesn't even have advertising at this point. Right.
Not yet. Not yet.
I mean,
the day will come.
Sure it will. Of course it will.
The day will
like
come.
the second largest advertising platform in the world is Meta, like Facebook, Instagram, whatever. So it's coming.
Yeah.
So
well, listen, Linda Yaccarino, blink twice if you need help, please, because
also, hold up a newspaper. Let us know. Are you still proof of life?
I just have to say, too, like Quinn Nelson, he's always right under either Elon or X whenever they post. He said, I can give you some teleprompter tips. Hit me up. Snazzy Labs, which...
Yeah, people were really upset about how many times she pointed at the camera.
I got uncomfortable. It felt uncomfortable to me.
Yeah.
And it's like someone said, listen, to connect with your viewers, use your hands and gesture towards the viewers, pretty often. And she was like, okay, I'm going to
start doing that.
I'm going to touch the camera lens. It's like Uncle Sam every other second, just like advertisers don't like you because they're not giving us money. But when they do give us money, we want you to click on those advertisers because that makes us money.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
That's it. Yeah. You summed it up perfectly. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, that just came out there at the end and it felt on point. So, okay, last couple of things I just want to mention. Killed by Google, it's getting another mark on the grave. KilledByGoogle.com is actually a website, and you should visit it because it has all the products Google has killed over the years. And now Chromecast, don't listen, Pixel, is the latest victim. And listen, I'm an Apple TV guy, obviously. I have them all over the house. But I do have one of these Chromecasts because I would bring them when we would travel. And for a hotel device, it was actually pretty good. In one of the later updates, it was able to connect to captive Wi-Fi networks, so I could use the hotel Wi-Fi. And you could program the Chromecast remote to control the TV. And that might not sound like a big deal, but in a lot of hotels now, they have this weird box behind the TV that basically controls all the TV stuff and basically makes it impossible to do things like change the input or like, and if you unplug that box, you can't use the remote in the room to even like change the volume because it's not a remote for the TV. It's a remote for that box that sits behind the TV. This has been my experience in the last like 3 or 4 hotels. And we did a road trip to New York and I stayed in like several. And this was my experience. But the Chromecast remote, you could literally say, here's the TV, do this. And then you could use the volume buttons on the Chromecast remote to adjust the TV volume. You can turn the TV on or off with the Chromecast remote. And it was a pretty cool device. And it was relatively inexpensive for what it was. But it's gone. It's dead. Google's discontinuing the Chromecast. So
yeah, I would agree with you. I have 2 Chromecasts. I have one that looks like that and I have an older one even than that, which is probably just like not 4K or something like that.
Right.
But it is certainly not an Apple TV, but for like $50 or whatever the heck stupid price it was not very expensive. It was perfect to throw into like your gear bag if you're going on a trip somewhere. Now they are replacing it sort of, right? They're replacing it with a much more expensive device, right?
This is the Google TV Streamer for $99, but this is mainly to compete with the Apple TV. Like, this is not something you're going to take on the road with you, I don't think. Right. It is very thin, so that's cool, but it looks like it has separate cables for power and HDMI, whereas the Chromecast literally had an HDMI like built in, and it would just kind of dangle from the TV. And so this is going to be a 4K streaming device, upgraded, faster, running Google TV. And it's going to be Google's answer to the Apple TV. Also because this is going to have Thread and Matter integration. So it will be kind of that smart home hub like the Apple TV is. Being Matter, I'm curious if it will actually go into the Apple Home app. Doubtful, but curious. But yeah, so Google TV Streamer will be the replacement.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you're right. It's not really a replacement. It's a competitor to the Apple TV, whereas the Chromecast wasn't really a competitor to the Apple TV. It's like I had them both. Like they could coexist because I didn't use them for the same purposes at all. In fact, I don't think we have a Chromecast plugged into a TV, but I do have one in my bag. It's just convenient.
And I think the Chromecast was a competitor to the Fire Stick, which I just think Amazon gave away so many of those and makes it so cheap that the Google Chromecast couldn't sustain itself. But I just want to say, if we want another hot take like last week, Fire TVs, mostly garbage.
Oh, no, that's not a hot take. That's just...
everybody knows.
I mean, it's a pun because it's a Fire TV, so it's hot. But
that's true.
Everyone agrees. There's nobody except for Jeff Bezos who thinks the Fire TV is good. And I guarantee you Jeff Bezos does not have a Fire TV. He super has like a QD OLED or whatever those, new Sony Bravia Core things are. So
I would rather use a smart TV features than a Fire Stick, because the Fire Stick seems so underpowered, and like the interface is so slow. The app for your phone, if you want to control it from your phone, is so janky. Like, it's not great. So
I would rather stare at the sun without my Eclipse glasses than use a Fire TV.
I think Apple. Oh, because the Roku TV is the other one. Roku has a stick for like 30 cents or whatever, and they just throw it into stuff. But I would not be opposed from Apple making a stick version of the Apple TV. Listen, strip out all the matter and the threads and all that kind of stuff. Make it $50. Apple's not going to go under $50, but $50.
Get rid of the Apple Arcade. We don't need that. Nobody uses it anyway.
You could, if my kids play Sneaky Sasquatch. I'm just saying.
But then you buy an Apple TV if that's the case.
Yeah. But make it a little stick where the HDMI is part of the stick, and then a USB-C for power. I think Apple could make a play for that kind of device, that device category. But that's just me. That's just me. All right, so that's the news. For personal tech, let's just say this. Do you use anything to keep track of movies you want to watch or have watched, or books you want to read or have read? Do you use anything for that?
No. I mean, I don't have a lot of time to read books or watch movies, so I don't need one of those. But I think, that's not true. This is not for that purpose. But the true answer to what you're saying is I just pin them in Call Sheet. If I'm like,
Pin them in
I'll
call
look.
sheet.
If I'm like, I want to watch this thing, I'll go into call sheet, I'll look it up, and I'll be like, yeah, that I should watch that later, and then I just pin it. So then the next time I open call sheet, I'm like, oh yeah, I wanted to watch that movie. I should see if I can, because call sheet. One nice thing about it is it will tell you where you can watch it. Like you can. That's one of the things you can tap on, and it'll show you like where you could watch this. But truthfully, I don't have a lot of time that I can spend. I would love to read books, Stephen. I wish I could, but I don't need a list of books to read because I don't have time to read books.
When you're on those planes, you're going to the one-day events. You take 2 flights a day. You can read on the planes.
I mean, I drove 6 hours to soccer practices, and it's only Wednesday this week.
Audiobooks. Listen to the audiobooks. That's an option.
I mean, truthfully, I had to listen to your interview with Adam Lisagor during one of those drives.
That was not 6 hours. I can tell you that. It was 45 minutes.
Just saying, I listen to podcasts during that time. That's my downtime is I listen to podcasts.
I do tell you, now that I work from home and my work is largely video content, I struggle because I can't listen to podcasts while I edit video.
Right.
Or record video.
I can't listen to podcasts while I write. I'll just be transcribing what you said.
Right. I've tried to do that too. Like if I need to do like administrative type tasks, like writing an email even, that's not super, but just writing an email, I can't have somebody talking in my ear while I'm writing.
Right.
And so my podcast listening time has really been truncated. I used to work a job where I commuted 45 minutes, like a drive, and that was like perfect podcast time. Like I would listen to like a podcast a day. But now I'm like, my podcasts fill up in my Pocket Cast queue. I'm like, well, I don't listen. So I listen on the weekend when I get groceries, if I'm doing a household chores or whatever. But when it comes to movies, we don't have time to watch a lot of movies. But when we do, one of the biggest annoyances is like, well, what should we watch? And if you have to ask that question, you're done. You're never going to watch a movie that night.
Right.
Because the choices are either not enough or too many, and where to find it, and like all of that it just doesn't work. So, you like that? I just muted my cough. But anyway, I've been using Sofa because it was recently had a big update, and I track now my books and my movies. And what's cool is you can like tag things as well as adding them to lists. And so I have like a movies to watch list. And hold on, I got to cough again. Here we go. Fill the time, Jason.
Yeah, well, while you're coughing, I do have a favor to ask you, Stephen, which is when you put a link in our show notes that is to a YouTube video, would you please tell me, because I just clicked on your link about the Sofa app and you just started yelling at me because I had the volume up so loud, and all of a sudden this YouTube video starts playing. So just let me know that, hey, this is a video, don't open it mid-show.
Did I put it? Oh, I put that in the Notion thing as the video.
Yes.
Yeah. I did a video on Sofa. But anyway, I like it because, so I have lists here in like books to read and movies and shows to watch. But then I can also go even more granular and say family movies to watch. So movies that I'm going to watch with the whole family, kids, spouse. And then I have movies that will just be me and Whitney. And so if there's ever a time where like we actually have a moment here, let's start a movie, I can go to one of those lists, and whether it's the family list or the list for just the spouse. And I like keeping track of books read. And so I've now been doing that in the Sofa app too, because I read books in all kinds of ways. Sometimes I do an ebook. Sometimes, a lot of times I do a physical book. And so the Apple Books thing, I like the whole year recap, but it wasn't tracking a lot of the books. And I know you can go to a book and say you've read it, even if you haven't purchased it, which is cool. But now I just have it all in Sofa. And I've liked it. It's been good. So just saying, Sofa.
Okay, I'm going to look at it. I'm not going to watch this video right now because you'll yell at me. Not you, but the video will yell at me. So I'm not going to watch it right now. But I might check it out. I mean, you're right though. If we sit down to watch a movie and we haven't already decided what we're going to watch,
which
is most of the time,
right? Exactly.
Well, one of two things happens. Either we're like, well, let's just see if the Olympics are on, or we end up watching a Marvel movie that my kids have seen 17 times and know every word to, and they're like, well, we could watch, Guardians of the Galaxy 13 again. I'm like, come on, guys.
Now, we did watch Twister the other night, the original, with the kids, because...
Is that on streaming already?
Yeah, it was on Max. It was on Max. Yeah.
I know my...
No, not the new one. The original.
Okay. You watched the original.
Not Twisters. Twister. So We watched
Important
Twister.
distinction there.
Yeah, which it may have traumatized my 8-year-old. I don't know, but yeah, the other boys liked it. They aptly point out now when movies are like this. It was the Terminator that was like this, and it was Twister like this, where it's like this movie is basically everyone just kind of driving around or chasing stuff. Like that's a majority of the movie. It's just people driving around chasing stuff. It's like
you should show them the Italian Job. That's literally the movie.
But no, I like that movie too. That's a good movie.
What's the baby? Is it Baby Driver? What's the other one? But like
there's Baby Driver. There's also there's the Italian Job.
Although technically those two movies, they're not driving around chasing stuff. They're driving around being chased.
Correct. Right. Fast and the Furious is movies about driving around.
No one has made more movies about just driving around than the Fast and the Furious franchise.
It's about
Good
family.
for them.
It's
Good
about
for
family.
them.
Anyway, all right.
And fast cars.
That's the show. We're going to talk about our favorite type of vacation in the bonus episode, and that's coming up now. If you want to listen to that, you can support the show directly on Apple Podcasts, or you can go to primarytech.fm and click bonus episodes and support the show there. You get access to all the past back episodes, and you'll listen to this new one. And, give us a 5-star rating and review an Apple Podcast if you haven't yet. You can go watch us over on youtube.com/@primarytechshow. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next week.